Welcome, welcome. I am so glad to be joined by a friend, Dr. Tracy Timberlake. I'm going to let her introduce herself. We are joining our communities, and so if you see a comment that you don't see on your feed, it's because we have combined. And just glad to be able to get our communities together to talk about this topic. Tips for college and graduate students to get that degree because it's so hard. We'll start off with introductions. Dr. Tracy, if you could.
Yes. Hello. I'm Dr. Tracy Timberlake, and I'm so excited that we're having this conversation. It's probably been a long time coming, but Dr. Patrice and I have known each other since college. That's how long. So we are decades in here to at least in our connection. And so we've obviously grown a lot since then. And we've talked about mental health. We've talked about these things in separate places. So I'm excited to be able to do it here. I'm a mindset and business coach. I primarily work with entrepreneurs, specifically high level ones who have many degrees, many letters before and after their name. And I help them to monetize themselves. And with that comes a lot of discussion around things regarding mental health. So this is just a wonderful extension of conversations that I'm sure both of us have been having in many different capacities. So thank you
Yes.
for doing this with me. This is so fun.
Yes, and I'm a licensed psychologist in Virginia and also create content around educational topics. And this is not, so we're not giving you all advice. We can't give you all individualized advice, but we can give you general tips of things that we've seen work, things that worked for us individually. And so I would love to hear your why. Why did you go for your degree?
Me? That's a very
Yeah.
good question. I wish that I had this profound answer for this. I don't. I was working at a university at the time, and I didn't even know that this was something that they offered. And then I got an email, and they said, "Hey, we're changing the structure of how we're giving, I guess, tuition reimbursement." And they said, if you want to get a degree, you need to get that degree before 2020, and we'll pay for it. And I said, wait a minute, I didn't even y'all pay for degrees? Like, wait a second, because at that point I'd already had my master's degree, and I remember when I got hired, they were like, "Oh, you already have a master's degree, so you probably don't want another one." I didn't realize that they were offering another terminal degrees. And so I just went to the little site, like, and looked to see which one sounded the best. No idea, no intention, no anything. I was just like, well, I mean, if you're going to pay for it, like, I might as well take advantage. And that was in 2014.
Okay.
And so that's how and why. I mean, I think it's one of those things that I feel like God leads you, and your job is to just be like, well, I guess I'll go down this path. But that's how I got it.
And
It's
the
because it
reason
was free.
why the reason why I started with your why, because
Mm.
that's the thing that got me through my degree. And
Mm.
everybody else, because there were lots of people, because if your why is, "I just wanna be called doctor," don't do it.
That's not a good
Don't.
reason,
That's
and that
really
was
not a
not
good.
my reason.
If
Yeah.
your why is for family or for anyone else, like, if your why is just, ugh, because, I'm still paying for mine, I'm glad yours was
Mm.
free.
Well, no, so it wasn't
Okay,
actually. I
wasn't
did have
free.
to,
Oh,
because I left my job in 2016 because I started my business in
okay.
2016. The business became very successful, and they were getting on my nerves. So I was like, "Well, I'm not staying here." Like, at this point, I'll just pay for it myself because I don't. So I did end up leaving and having to come out of pocket. But the initial reason why I started was because it was free. Halfway through, it was like, "Oh, this is actually so great." When I started my business, I was like, this is going to be research that's going to support the business and what I do, because I in terms of coaching, there's not a lot of people who have just the empirical data that I have in terms of research, backing the industry and backing what I do. So that became a why, but it wasn't my why in the beginning. So
Yeah,
what
yeah.
was your why?
And so I wanted to be at the top of my field. So
Mm.
I worked with somebody else, and in order to have certain insurance companies, she had to
Mhm.
have a psychologist. And so I was like, "Oh, okay." Well, because she was a master's level social worker,
Mhm.
and in order some insurance companies wanted her to have a psychologist on staff. So I was like, "Oh." I think I
Makes
want to be a
sense.
psychologist. And then at my doctor's school interview, they were like, why do you want to do this? And I was like, oh, I want to do therapy. And they were like, well, you should also want to do psychological
Mm.
testing because you don't need this degree
To do therapy.
to. And
Mhm.
so I love doing psychological testing as well. And I just the one thing that was difficult was still experiencing racism, still experiencing difficulty, still experiencing sex because I kinda thought the
Mm.
degree would shield me from some things, and it was like, "Oh,
Oh,
no.
no.
Oh, no."
Mm-mm. No. No, and I think that, I've been having these conversations with a lot of, women who have their doctorate, specifically Black women who have their doctorate. It's a series that I'm sort of, into right now because I find that in these spaces, everybody has very similar experiences, but it's like none of us have talked about it publicly, right?
Yeah,
So getting really the conversation around the bias that exists, even when, or the intimidation factor that exists when you have that title in front of your name. What does that look like in the real world, right? It's been so interesting, and you're not the only person who's experienced that. That's for sure.
yep. And I just wanna thank everyone that's welcoming, that's viewing either on replay or now. Kalita is my TikTok bestie. She's a social worker out in Chicago. I had her on a few weeks ago, and so just wanted thank you for tuning in.
Yeah.
But, ah, so for me, some other mental health things that I saw happen in graduate school is I kind of compare graduate school to to hazing. That's a personal thing because it's like, do you really want it? How
Mhm.
bad do you
Yeah, how bad?
every semester there was something. So we had comprehensive exams, the
Mhm.
dissertation, there were all
Mhm.
of these hurdles, all of these things to go through because not everybody makes it all the way to the end.
And that's such a good point. You're right. I mean, in my program, I think only um, in my cohort, I would say there was only a handful of us that actually finished, and that's out
Mhm,
of like 20 something people. So
mhm.
it's really taxing, and I do think that they do it on purpose. I do think that it's a hazing process, like a legally hazing process, because to get to that terminal space, like you really have to prove it almost. It's like, well, you want it, prove it. It's definitely not, well, you just take some classes, you write a 10-page paper and you're done. It's and to that point, just regarding mental health, I think that that process can take a toll on you because you will
Yes.
question your entire identity. You'll be like, "Why am I
Yes.
doing this?" Like, I know that I'm smart. Like, I know that I'm not dumb. Like, I don't know why this is so difficult, and you begin to question everything that you thought that you were in that process.
Yeah, and I think who you have around you,
Mhm.
and because I went to therapy in graduate school and the person wasn't the right fit, and so
Mm.
I wish if I was doing it again, I would have found a better therapist because I could have used some,
Help.
license support. Because
Help.
in
Right.
grads, it brings stuff up. It just
It
it
does.
opens doors, especially if you're going into a helping profession, because a
Mhm.
lot of helpers, the things I've seen is people that wanna help. It often comes from a place of pain, and healing that pain
True.
can be really, really important. But a lot of people, I think in those programs, things will come up, and you might need to reach out for some support, not just from family and friends. But I had to be
Mhm.
careful because there were people that are like, "Oh, why do you wanna do that?" Or and so you can't
Oh, same.
listen to the people
Mhm.
that say those things.
Yeah, same. I've had people who are like, "Well, why do you wanna do that? Like, for what?" And I'm like, "Well, first of all, because it's free. Like, why would I not? Like, second of all, because I want to." Like, so I think that, again, like, that strong why in the beginning is so important. Also really knowing yourself and having the ability to give yourself what you need. I almost wish that they would include in some of these programs just the option, or at least some sort of training around like what to do when you are struggling and overwhelmed, because I feel like
Mm.
they don't care. Like, I feel like they do not care about your life. Like, they're like, this paper is due and this is the timeline that you're on. I do not care, right? And that's there's a spectrum of that, because I've definitely had conversations with
Yeah.
certain people who said, "Oh no, my program, they actually did really care about life balance and things like that." But for a lot of programs, I don't think that they do. And I don't think that they um, are considering, hey, let's throw in some resources just in case people are struggling with this. And but that could be part of the hazing too. People could be like, no,
Yeah.
we're not giving you resources. You figure it out or you don't. Like, that could be part of it.
And that's where for me, connecting with people that were ahead of me, so my
Mhm,
first year connecting with 2nd and 3rd years, that was
mhm,
really important, and that's how I found out who to get for my dissertation chair and who to not, like, who
yeah,
to stay away from, because little decisions like that can really change. Because if you have a nightmare for, like, a dissertation chair who's so there was one particular person at our university, and she would just make things difficult for no reason. Like, there was, just
mhm,
her degree was difficult, and she just thought the process should be difficult. My chair was a gem. Like,
mm,
she was like, "The best dissertation is a done dissertation." So, like, it
literally,
didn't have to
that's how I felt. Yeah.
so, like,
I was
she
like, "Get this
wasn't
done."
now, so she wasn't looking for, like, absolute perfection, like, it was now
Mhm,
you had to do a good job, like, it was a lot of work, it was hard, we worked through through all of that, but it wasn't
mhm.
nearly as difficult as some of the people in my cohort that had other chairs.
Yeah, I think that, and when you do have a difficult chair, I think advocating for yourself is really important. I think
Yeah.
sometimes you go into the process and you look at all of these people who already have the degree that you're trying to get, and then it sort of puts them up on a pedestal a little bit, and so you're like looking
Mhm.
at them like, oh, but they know better than me, and there is there's a level of truth to that in the sense that they've been doing it longer than you have. But if this is your research and your dissertation, you have to advocate for that, and I don't think that people are aware because then they just take whatever their chair says or whatever their committee says and then they struggle with it. Where as for me, when I was writing my dissertation, one of the biggest things is that they just really wanted it to be longer. And I was like, I'm not
Mm.
writing anymore. I don't think you understand. This is not getting any longer. Like this is it. Like so unless you can be very specific about what is missing from this is it. Like there's no more. There's no more writing. And I had to say that like multiple times to be like this is all I'm doing. And it's not that I was unwilling. It's like this is what the research is. Like I don't know what like if you're telling me like add like find something on this topic or sure, fine, but they couldn't give me a reason for why it needed to be longer.
I
And I was
just
like, this is
wanted more
not going to be
pages.
too right because that's what their experience was, right, in their process.
Yeah.
Like they know that the average dissertation is somewhere, 175, 200 pages. I'm not doing it. So like this is not happening. So I don't know what else. And unless you can give me a solid reason for why it should be, um we're gonna stay right here. This and I really had to push back for myself because
Mm.
they just kept trying to get me to do it, and I was like, "I don't who do I need to talk to?" Because I don't know what else to say. And I think for a lot of people, they struggle in the dissertation process. In that beginning part, right, when you're just taking the classes and you're learning and kind of like beginning the research, that's fine. I think a lot of people because by the time you get to a doctoral stage, you usually already have a master's degree. You're well aware of
Yeah.
what academics look like. It's the research part that trips people up a lot of the times, and if you can learn to advocate for yourself, you're gonna be much better off.
So I actually went right into my doctoral program from my
Mm.
bachelor's because
Which a lot of
it
people
wasn't
recommend, by
required.
the way. Oh,
Yeah,
that's good for
it
you.
wasn't
Yeah.
yeah, so
Mhm.
it was a 5-year program if you had a master's. It was a
Mhm.
5-year program if you didn't. It didn't make
Oh,
it
good
shorter
for you.
to come in
Yeah.
with yeah, to come in with a
Mhm.
master's. I was like, "Oh,
So why do that? Yeah.
I'm gonna go straight in," and they preferred it because then they were able to mold the person kinda the way they wanted to.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of people do say that. A lot of people recommend at least the people that I've spoken to who waited,
Yeah.
10, 15 years to go back to school, they're like, "Oh, I recommend just doing it straight through." If you know that you wanna do
Mhm.
it, just
Yeah.
go straight through.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then sometimes that's not feasible because of family, because
Mhm.
and I think people
Life.
being gentle with themselves, because if now isn't the time. There were people that didn't finish, but it was because they realized it really wasn't what they wanted. That there was
Mhm.
something else that opened up for them. They ended up shifting and doing something else. And so someone that doesn't finish, I don't see that as a failure if they
Oh,
still
no.
go off and do whatever they were
Mhm.
made to do. Like, because I don't think everyone needs a doctorate. I honestly, so
100% no.
now I'm preparing, so I have a 6-year-old, and if he decides he doesn't wanna go to college, if we can
Mhm.
get him if he wants to start his business and be an
Mhm.
entrepreneur and do those things, now if what he wants to do requires a degree, requires a certification, do the thing, but he just can't stay in my house for free and not do anything.
Right,
Like,
and that's
that's my only thing.
that's right, like, you don't have to go to college, but you have to get a job. Like, you have to do something.
You have to do
Um,
something.
right, and I think that's such a good point, especially in today's like society in the world that we
Yes.
live in now, like college degrees are not what they used to be. Like I think the
Yeah.
currency of a college degree doesn't have the same weight as it used to have.
Yeah.
And people ask all the time, like, "Hey, I want to go back and get my doctor. I want to get my PhD. I want to, go back and do this. Should I do it?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you want to do? Like, because
Yes.
if what you want to do requires it, sure. Like, I don't know that if it wasn't presented to me in the way that it was presented to me, that I would
Yeah.
have done it, right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't think that and at least in what I do as an entrepreneur, what I do as a business coach, it does not help me. I mean, what helps me is the research because I know that for my own edification, but the world doesn't care like in terms of
Yeah.
my industry. If you, for
Yeah.
you, it does matter because of the level of depending on if you're wanting to
Kind
do the testing or
of.
something formal with the
Yeah.
insurance,
Yeah.
whoever, right? If
Yeah.
that's the track that you want to take. But for a lot of places, like it doesn't. Like I said, I don't know that I would have done it if it wasn't presented to me in the way that it was presented. And I think God knew that because I
Yeah.
had no intention of going back to school because for what? Like I had no intention.
For
Right?
and there had to be and if it had been free, like if I could go back and get a
Mhm.
law degree for free, okay, I'm for free,
Right.
maybe,
I
but
mean,
I don't. It's a lot.
yeah.
It's a lot. It's a
Just from a
lot.
position of learning, because I think
Yeah.
people yeah, and to that end, like, people think that having this title, whether it's an MBA or whether it's a doctorate degree, like, people think having the title is somehow going to elevate you. It's not. Like, hear me when I say this, it doesn't. Like, I know people who have the exact same degree who are that I do, who are in the same jobs that they were in when I
Oh,
left
wow.
mine and are doing the exact same thing that they were doing before they graduated. So it is up to you to figure out what you want to do with it, and then you kind of position yourself accordingly. But the degree by itself, the piece of paper hanging, above my desk over there, does nothing for me. And like alone, it's like me. I'm the one that I push it forward. But yeah.
Yes. And and then getting to like cuz sometimes you do experience anxiety or depression or there
Hmm.
is sadness. You experience life happens. So many people in my program, there were lost. There were
Hmm.
some people got married. Some people did all these things. Life continues to happen and there is no perfect balance. And I don't think I was ready for that going into graduate school that like, oh, like you're going to be like study like your family my family didn't see me sometimes.
Right.
I would just go and lock myself, especially around finals or when a big
Hmm.
paper was due,
Hmm.
because I'm a
Hmm.
big last minute kind of person. I'm gonna
Oh,
get
me
it. So
too.
I just have to go shut it down for the next,
Yeah.
5 hours and I'm gonna get everything done. But I haven't been working on this for, an
Hmm.
hour a week for the past 10 weeks now. Like I'm gonna wait till the last minute and it'll
Yeah.
it'll get
Yeah.
done.
No, and I think but it's important to know that about yourself, right? If
Yeah.
you know that you are not a person who likes to come back to things over and over and over again over a period of time, don't look at your calendar and tell yourself that you're going to do that. Like because then when you don't do it, you're going to feel like a failure, which then contributes to the whole mental health issue, right? But if you know
Yeah.
yourself, like I'm the same way. Like I know that I have incredible focus. I can lock myself in a room for 8 hours and knock this paper out. I finished my dissertation in a weekend. I was like, I'm going to spend 22 hours doing this thing and it's going to be done. But there are some people who are like, no, they needed to work on it, 30
Yeah.
minutes a day, every day, because otherwise it wasn't
Yeah.
going to get finished. You have
Yes.
to know your regular rhythms because if you
Yeah.
don't, you're gonna think you're failing at something. If they're gonna tell you, hey, work on it a little bit, like manage your time well. And then if you don't do it, you're gonna feel like you're failing at something. And that's not true. It's just not how your energy operates.
I wanted to highlight Christina's comment because, yes,
Mm.
I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation because you might want the title, but do you need it? Because if you don't need it, don't. It is way too much work if you absolutely do not need it.
But do I need yeah, and I, have a friend who I graduated with, we were, together in our cohort, who has said she has the title, she wanted it, because she wanted to learn, but she doesn't even use her title because in the industry that she's in, it's male dominated, it's
Okay.
white man dominated, and so it doesn't actually help her to use that title in the industry that she operates in. So she doesn't use it at all. Which is kind of a shame because you work so hard for something and to feel like it actually is working against you doesn't
Yeah.
feel fun. So you do have to kind of know like how do you intend to use it or if you intend to use it at all.
And I work with kids
Mhm.
and kids don't like going to the doctor. And so for
Mm.
me, I introduced myself, I'm Dr. Berry, but you can call me Miss Patrice, like, because if it
Aw,
would if in their
cute.
mind, if it would be hard to come to appointments to see Dr.
Oh,
Berry,
yeah. They're gonna get like,
but,
you're
like,
gonna
it
give
just
them a
has to
shot.
be like, and that's I'm not the kinda that's the first session with all
Don't give
people,
you shots.
like, I'm not that kind of doctor. I don't do shots, I don't do medicine, like, this is
Mhm,
just, and the fact that they're not here because, they did something wrong or anything like that, like, that's a
mm,
part of my standard thing.
yeah.
And there are also people that if I force them to call me doctor, it might hurt our therapeutic relationship. And so as
Oh,
long as people
sure.
are being professional, but I don't go by Patricia because my name is Patrice.
Who is
Anything,
Patricia?
Patricia.
Like,
I
who
don't,
is
I don't know who she is. I have a cousin
Yeah.
named Patricia, but it's not me, and she doesn't
Right.
answer to Patrice. And so no.
Right.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, that's interesting. I graduated in 2017, like, and having to because I already had my business at that point. I already had a personal brand at that point. So the transition into using the title was weird because people just knew me for what I was, and then at some point, stepping into the title, it doesn't even feel like I stepped into the title. I feel like people just call me Dr. TT almost as like a nickname now. Like, that's what I tell people. I'm like, I answer to it, but it doesn't feel like a title. It just feels like a nickname that a lot of my clients or people who know me on the internet call me, which is fine. I mean, it's there are certain circumstances, like I still teach a class at the university once a semester, so there are still circumstances where I enter into a room and it's the official like Dr. Timberlake, which is weird. Like, I'm like, who is that person? One time somebody called me Reverend Doctor, because I have a master's degree in ministry, and right, and so it was like really formal. They're like, well, and I'm like, and I like the title itself is correct, but that feels completely outside of my identity to be called like, Reverend Doctor, because that's not what I go by at all.
Wow. And I went to so my graduate school was Christian, and that was
Mhm,
the focus to integrate psychology
mhm,
and faith in a ethical way.
mm,
And so my spirituality, my faith, that was a big part of what guided me through, and connecting with
yeah,
um just connecting on deeper levels. I like to
mhm,
explain to high school, especially middle school and high school students, because the friends you make in middle school and high school, it's kind of because we live in the same area.
right, proximity.
But
Mhm,
the people that you meet at college, the people you meet at grad school, like these are people we were like-minded. We
yep.
both were interested in these things, and I found some of those connections to be I have some good high school ones, but my college and grad school connections they're just deeper. It's a different type of relationship for me.
Yeah, and that's such a good point because I think when you are working towards the same thing and you understand the context of that same thing, like how difficult you're going through the same ups and downs, I do think that there's a stronger bond in that regard. And you're in the same life stage at the same time, and you can kind of grow from there. Whereas like when you're like 12, well, you can one can go into the military and one can go into politics, and it's very separate. But yeah, I think some of my closest friendships have come from the work that I've done, college and beyond.
And for people from marginalized communities, I think making sure to know that that experience can sometimes be different. And
Mhm.
so connecting, so we formed because it was me and I believe three other black females, and then one, she's Cuban, and
Mm.
we formed our No Child Left Behind crew. And we were like,
We're all doing it. Yeah.
we're all getting through. Like, we are
Right.
gonna support each other.
Mhm.
We are going to encourage each other. If you find out something, some
Yeah.
inside information about something, like, we're gonna share it with one another. Having that community was truly priceless
Mhm.
because there would be difficult classes. There
Yeah.
would be difficult time. There would be things that would come up and things that we experienced that wasn't like other individuals in our cohort.
Yeah, in the same way because of, the context of culture and
Yeah.
things like that, and I always say, like, find friends, like, find a study buddy, find like, I'm so fortunate because of that, like, having that, like, really close friendships, and even now, like, we graduated in 2017, like, still, I just hung out with her over the weekend, like, usually once a month, we get together, and again, to the point of having these long-standing relationships that you build, it's really it's really great, and highly would recommend. Like, it helps you tremendously when you do not feel like you are by yourself in this
Yes.
process.
I love that. So we have a question. When getting a higher degree, how do older people handle the mental stress?
So that's a really good question. How do they handle it? And I think there's a follow-up part, like talking
Yeah.
about post kids age. The oldest person in my program was in her 60s, like in
Mhm.
terms of the cohort.
Yeah.
And I think that first and foremost, if you are older, you have to recognize that you're not on the same timeline that other people are, right? So you can take as long as you need to, go as quickly as you need to. Like, I really think that you having your own personal goals is going to help alleviate a lot of the pressure that you're going to feel. Because when I was in the program, I was like, how can I do this as fast as possible? Because I do not want to be here long. I don't need to be here long. Like, I have things to do. So I finished my program. It was a 4-year program that I finished in 3.5 years. So I was like on a trajectory of like, I'm going to take I'm gonna take 7 classes at a time. I'm going to like, right. So, um, I think recognizing that is like you get to go at your own pace in the journey is going to be very helpful, because the people that you're starting off with, some of them are going to have very clear cut goals of that are expeditious. And so you don't need to do that, especially if you've been out of school for a very long time and you're trying to ease your way back into academia. I was working at a university. I was managing an academic program at the university. So even though I hadn't been in school for 7 years, I was still in school. I was in school every day. Like I understood the process of academics. Whereas if you've been out for a long time, it takes a minute to get back in. So don't jump in thinking that you can do what you used to do. And there's just more obligations, I think, when you're older. Like when
Yeah.
you're older, you have more life things that are taking place, and just like Dr. Patrice said, life is still happening. Like there's life is still revolving around you. It doesn't stop because you've decided to go back to school. So the first thing I would definitely say is give yourself a little bit of grace on that timeline, because it's not as, hardcore as some of what other people will be doing.
And I would also say to not count yourself short, because to
Mhm.
me, if I were to go back to graduate school now, I know more than like just about
That's
life.
true.
Just because I was
That's true.
I was not I didn't have the same emotional maturity. I'm not I think I'm at a better place now. I think I would have handled some things differently. Not
Mhm.
that anything went horribly wrong, but just I could have approached things in a different way. One of my professors, I loved it. She would say, "Sometimes you just have to take your B. Just take." She was like, "Why are you breaking?" Because like grad school GPA, because
No
once
one
you finish
cares.
grad, nope, nobody
No one
cares.
cares. Like,
Now
nobody cares about that.
you can't
Mm.
get a B minus or a C, because for
Right.
us, B minus or C, which was like 79, I think, like you couldn't get below that, or else you couldn't get
Yeah, I
credit
think
for
ours
the
was a C.
class.
Yeah.
Yeah, um, but because she would be like, why, like, don't, get some experiences, like make sure that you're having a well-rounded experience and not just studying, 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 and you're not
Oh, yeah.
actually applying what you're learning.
Right.
And I really wish that I had started my business along with school, or that I
Mm.
had been more that I had more of an entrepreneur's mindset, because in school and even after school, I had an employee mindset where it's like,
Mm.
I'm just going to work for somebody. Like I'm going to get a good job with some good benefits, and I was happy doing that. But now being an entrepreneur, I really encourage people to find a way to work for themselves if they can, because the freedom I have, because I wouldn't be here doing this with you if I worked for somebody else.
That's true.
Because
No,
somebody
that's true.
else could get mad at something I said. Somebody else could, because I'm very open about the things that I'm passionate about.
Mhm.
And I like being able to create safe spaces for everyone. And there are organizations where I wouldn't be allowed to do that. And that's
Yeah.
very important to me. And so I think you're able to just have a different mindset. And then the biggest issue I've sometimes seen is some of the technology, if people need to
Yeah.
like figure out, because a lot of things are online. So right,
Mhm.
because we had physical books. Nowadays, like a lot of the books are electronic, or
Oh,
just
I would hate it. Yeah, I would hate
navigating
that.
a lot of those. And also, and I'm sure there are still physical copies of the
Mhm.
books available, but the bookstore might not. I don't like things
Right.
have just changed. And so being able to like you said, and like we've said, give yourself grace in that process. And then if you need support, getting that support along the
Yeah.
way.
For sure, getting the support, like, and I think in the process of getting any degree, but particularly some of the more advanced ones, like, don't feel like you have to do it all by yourself. Like,
Yeah.
no one does it by themselves. Let me just put that. No one's out here doing that by themselves. Like, everybody has a mentor or an advocate or a best friend or somebody, a counselor, or somebody, that an advisor that's helping them.
Yeah.
And so don't discount some of those resources that your university is going to offer you, because they're going to have some
Yeah.
available.
Yep. And if people need, so I like the fact that our school had certain, if I needed accommodations or if I needed extra supports or if
Hmm.
I needed things, that there were places and people that I could go to for support if if that was needed. And being mindful of how much to tell professors, because we had some professors that would use that against people later, where it was like, yeah, so just having good boundaries with that, but if you do have a safe space, being able to use it.
Yeah, and I would say, like, and this is for any person of any age, like, even before you enter into the process, begin some of the inner work that's necessary in advance. Like, because part of the reason why it was easy for me to advocate for myself, or why I really just didn't care about what they said, was because I was like very, very clear on who I was. Like, what you're not going to do is tell me about me, right? And I was really clear on that going in. Um but that's because I'd done so much work prior
Yeah,
to, without even knowing that I'd done the work, by the way.
yeah,
And I think that helped a great deal, because then I didn't feel small. I didn't feel inferior. I didn't feel like somebody was above me. They knew more than I did. Like, I didn't have those same feelings.
yeah,
And it really did contribute to how I was able to advocate for myself throughout the program, or defend myself. Like, that defense situation, when you have to defend a dissertation or defend, your proposals, like, that defense situation was easy for me, because remember, when you're going back to get your doctorate, you are becoming the expert in a subject matter, right? They are not. And I was really clear on that, because I had started my business in the middle of my doctoral program. So
yeah,
I knew my industry. You cannot tell me about women and entrepreneurship, because that wasn't that's not their lane. Their lane is to make sure that I finish this dissertation with whatever APA format wasn't necessary at the time. So I was really, really clear on who I was before I entered into it. Again, not because I was intentional about it. I just happened to have done a lot of work on myself.
wow. And so as we kind of start to wrap things up, I'll go first. I want you to kind of think about what would be just one or a few tips that you would give just so that people can protect their mental health, their mindset in grad school and college. And for me, one of the biggest things is you're not going to be able to control everything.
Mhm,
That often people who are very successful often manage anxiety. Like that's very, very common. And when you strive for certain goals, sometimes perfection is what people are looking for. And truly, the whole best dissertation is a done dissertation.
mhm,
And the fact that sometimes I just took a B. Like it wasn't worth it to study until 5 a.m. just to go from a 89 to a 91. Like it just wasn't worth it. And so making sure to take care of yourself and
mhm,
your family. And I think communicating with family, so it's like, hey, I'm starting this again. I might need some people to help out. So if I have other people that expect me to cook or expect me to do these things, hey, I'm starting back. We're going to have to talk about how to work
mhm,
this because
mhm.
people's expectations might have to adjust some. So I was single and no kids or nothing when I was able, I had different liberties, but if I were to go back now, I would have to communicate some things to say, this is the time I'm going to set aside and protect for my family because that is important. But then like y'all might not see me, on Tuesday. Tuesday might be my day that y'all don't really see me that
Right.
much and y'all have to figure out how you're going to eat and all that stuff.
Mhm.
But what would be
Yeah.
any tips that you have?
Yeah, I mean, those things, I would reiterate those things. Another one is, like get tools that you know that you can use during the process. So whatever tools those are, because the thing is that whatever degree you're going into, it is a part of your life, but it is not your whole life. And I
Yeah.
think when you try to make it your whole life, it
Yeah.
becomes so taxing. It's such a heavy weight and a big burden to bear. And let's be honest, we live in a country where we can get these degrees and we can go to school, and what a
Yeah.
blessing. But don't turn that blessing into a burden unnecessarily. It is not your whole life. You still have friends, you still have a family. Some of you will still have jobs. You still have activities that you enjoy. Try to incorporate all of those things into your regular rhythms, and don't only focus on school, because if you do that, like I said earlier, you will feel like a failure. You're going to
Yeah.
like, it is designed to make you feel like you are not good enough.
Yeah.
And it is 4 or 5 years out of your life that will be a blip in history at the end of it. So don't make it more than what it is. Have good communication with your family, with your friends. Create a schedule for yourself that you feel like you can adhere to.
Yeah.
Don't lie to yourself and tell yourself you go and study every day, like, because that's not what you're doing. Like, no one's doing that. Like, I promise you nobody's doing. But like, have realistic goals and a realistic timeline for yourself that you can keep, and then hold yourself accountable, or get an accountability partner, or get a therapist, have a life coach, somebody that can help you in the process. Is really going to help you protect your mental health. And having those mentors or the people around you that can remind you of who you are when you forget is so important.
I love that. And for me, a lot of the difficulty of graduate school, because somebody asked about the transition from a 4-year school to graduate school and what that was like. And the thing about undergrad is that it was very broad because you
Yeah,
had to have, it wasn't, I think only 60 credits or so was in my actual field. Everything else was kind of,
like
other
geology.
things.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
and then but then for graduate school, I really got to pick those things that I wanted and hone in on the things I really cared about. And so while it was difficult, I actually I enjoyed both, but I think there are differences and there are positive pluses and minuses to everything. The transition was relatively, but when I say, because I'm a bit of an optimist, and so I'm not telling y'all about those times. I threatened to quit every like at least
Every
once a
day.
semester.
Like, why am I doing
I
this?
would call my mom
Why am
and
I
be
doing this?
like, "I'm done. This is," and she would just listen, and she wouldn't
Mm,
say anything because I would like my I just needed to get it out. I just needed
mm,
somebody that I could vent to, and
mm.
that was she was my person, but um that's why I call it hazing because I truly wanted it, and I'm thankful that I went through the experience, but I wouldn't say to do
Mm.
it unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah, like, it's like a personal goal, like, you need it, like, yeah, yes, concur, ditto.
And I love your tips for people to turn their dissertation or whatever they're working on into a book, into a business, or make sure
Mhm,
that it's gonna, because often your chair like because you published in their name as well.
mhm,
And
yeah, true,
so, they're furthering their career,
right.
and so make sure that you're profiting in some way
Oh,
during the
100%. I
process.
have yeah, my dissertation became the baseline for my signature program,
Yeah.
that I've run for the last 7 years now, and, I've gotten a big ROI on my
Oh.
degree. So, I'm pretty happy. So highly recommend. 10 out of 10.
And so, any final thoughts you have?
No, I wish everybody luck though, and please feel free to reach out to either of us, and we would be happy to have more conversation around this, because it's a big decision, and you should do it with as much with much insight as you possibly can. So,
And for anyone in my community, if you are working towards a doctorate, please check out Dr. Timberlake's page. You have a whole series of
yeah.
just multiple. This month has been
Mhm.
about getting that degree and
Mhm.
talking about a lot of these different topics in, more depth. And so please check that out. And okay, so the channel name, if you
Oh,
could share your socials and I'll share
yeah,
mine.
it's just Tracy Timberlake everywhere. So if you go to Tracy Timberlake on YouTube, you'll find me. Tracy Timberlake on Instagram, you'll find me. I'm Tracy Timberlake everywhere. It's very easy. If you want the series on, it's called Doctorate Diaries. So you can go to doctoratediaries.com and it'll take you to the series on YouTube.
Perfect, perfect. And then I am at Dr. Patrice Berry across platforms. And so we hope y'all enjoy the rest of your day.